Narcissistic Pete here with Darlene Lancer, MFT, and you do so many things, but mostly known these days for your very interesting books you've written on relationships, and I'm going to let you explain about that.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to talk to your audience. And my first book was Codependency for Dummies. How that happened was I was writing about relationships and self-esteem. Actually, I did a little ebook on how to deal with your self-criticism and build your self-esteem. And I was blogging on codependency, and Wiley Publishing came to me and they asked me to write Codependency for Dummies. And then after that came out...
That's a big series, and probably a lot of people read it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Many people read it.
Nice?
Yeah. And interestingly, I thought that I would hear from people in my private practice who maybe were living with an addict, because that originally was how researchers determined that people were codependent, is because they were in relationships with alcoholics. They called them co-alcoholics, and then eventually they determined that the partners of alcoholics had dysfunctional families long before they ever met the addict, and then after that, codependency became its own diagnosis, although it's not an official mental illness, and Codependents Anonymous was born. Anyway, after my book came out, Hazelton Publishers, who publish a lot of books for 12-step programs, they asked me to write Conquering Shame and Codependency. They wanted me to zero in on the connection between shame and addiction and codependency. And that's what my second book was about, Conquering Shame and Codependency, 8 Steps to Freeing the True You. And that's really a workbook. I delved really deeply into the subject of shame. In my own life, I was unaware of my own shame. Before that, I had a dream that I was sleeping with a woman named Shame, and I didn't want to know her, and I wanted to get her out of the bed. So at that time, I went into analysis to deal with my own issues of shame. In fact, I was teaching classes on self-esteem. Interestingly, shame is not talked about very much in Western cultures. It's the focus in collectivist cultures in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Russia, in Asia. But we certainly have a lot of shame here in America. People are more guilt-prone, making someone feel guilty rather than saying, you're a shame on the family. And anyway, so it underlies codependency and addiction. It's the common denominator. I thought that a lot of people that were suffering from codependency, as I started to say, were living with addicts, but it turned out that I got all these clients that were involved with narcissists. So I started addressing that topic and writing about narcissism. I did a very popular ebook in 2015 on dealing with the narcissist, and that was very successful. And I had wanted to turn it into a paperback. And so I did that with this recent book, and I expanded it. There's a lot more research, and I also added not just dealing with a partner, but dating someone and how to leave the relationship. The book really is broad enough to help people that are in any abusive relationship, with any person that's like a cluster B personality, that would include histrionic or borderline personality, or even an addict actually can be very abusive. So you have the tools there to take back your power. I mean, the thing about narcissistic relationships and narcissists is that they prioritize power and they will sacrifice the relationship to get it. Whereas codependents prioritize the relationship and they will sacrifice themselves to keep it. So they're on different trajectories. And in the beginning, it seems wonderful and romantic, and then things change over time and the relationship starts to deteriorate. And then people get what's called trauma bonded because of the abuse, and it's very hard to leave. That's when they come to me for help. Or it could be actually a sibling, a parent, My mother was a narcissist, so I have a lot of clients that grew up with a narcissistic parent. And the symptoms are very similar to growing up in an alcoholic home. So people they call them ACAs, adult children of alcoholics, the low self-esteem, the insecurity, the shame that's underneath, and a lot of the symptoms are the same as someone who grew up with a narcissistic parent.
Well, there's a whole lot I could ask you about just on that opening statement, but by the way, your book is called Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist, Essential Tools for Improving or Leaving Narcissistic and Abusive Relationships by Darlene Lancer.
This one just came out a couple years ago. This is the expanded version.
Oh, I see.
With up-to-date research. The other book was about 100 pages. This is 300.
I'm holding it looks like paper. They had these in the medieval times, I believe. Some paper books. Yeah. Well, no, here we are. Okay, well, good. So this is a recent book, and it's getting a lot of attention. I'm sure it's helping a lot of people. If I recall, there's something called the Dark Triad: narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism.
Right.
Did I get it? Okay.
Yes.
I got a star on my chart. So, can you just define that? Because that word is thrown around a lot these days.
Narcissism?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when somebody just doesn't like somebody else, they call them a narcissist. So it's in our common vernacular, but it actually has a specific meaning. It doesn't apply to just anybody you're mad at.
That's right. And someone could be narcissistic, meaning they have some traits, but that's not the same as NPD, a narcissistic personality disorder. And you need 3 specific symptoms. You need 5 altogether out of 9 that are in the diagnostic manual. And you have to have a lack of empathy. You have to have an extreme need for admiration and grandiosity. Those are the 3 essential traits, and then you need 2 more. The list includes exploitation of people, envy, arrogance, feeling you need special treatment, associate with high status people, and go to the best restaurants, the best school, have the most expensive car. I think you get the picture. The other trait, again, it's not essential, but it's the one that partners and family members of narcissists complain about the most, and that's entitlement. So narcissists think they don't have to follow the rules, they can cut in line, they don't have to pay their traffic tickets, they don't have to do what most people consider the norm. And sometimes it borderlines on breaking the law, being immoral. And the more that a person does things like that, it starts to look like psychopathology, lying and things like that, and doing illegal things. And then there can be an overlap. The more psychopathic and sociopathic symptoms that a narcissist has, they start to look like what's called a malignant narcissist. And they're more cruel, more abusive, more malicious. Interestingly, people think that because of what they read on the internet and here on YouTube, they think that all narcissists are vile and aggressive. That's not true. If you notice, aggression isn't even one of the required symptoms. So not all narcissists act that way, but they do put themselves first. They can be very manipulative. People have a tendency to think anyone that's arrogant or selfish is a narcissist. Arrogant is a trait, but selfishness is not. A lot of people are selfish. They may be a snob, they may be an arrogant, but that doesn't make them a narcissist. So there are specific traits. In fact, there's such a thing as healthy narcissism that people don't talk about. And some very successful leaders in industry or Oprah, for instance, they have a lot of confidence. They are successful and they are achievers, but they also are respectful of people and want to even help other people. healthy narcissism means you have a good sense of yourself and self-esteem, and you have agency. They call it agenic. You're like goal-oriented. You can be a leader. You can follow through on your goals and take initiative.
Good answer. Why are we so enamored with narcissists?
Well, that's a really good question.
You're picking up your book, so I feel like you've already answered this question.
Yes, it's in the book. And, they did research. Several people would meet with a person for maybe 20 minutes, and then they would repeat this week after week. And it took people, I think, 7 weeks to be turned off to a narcissist, because their goal is called impression management, is to make you like them.
Oh.
They want power. And if you look up to them, that's one reason they brag and they tell about how great they are. That pumps them up for a couple of reasons. I mean, it pumps up their ego because underneath there's a lot of insecurity and shame, and whether or not it's conscious, but it's there. They need what's called narcissistic supply. They need constant admiration, validation of how great they are, and they'll tell you that. So in the beginning, people, and often they have a lot of charisma, they're very good at cognitive empathy, very low on emotional empathy.
So they can read people well.
Exactly. It's a very dangerous, and you combine that with putting themselves first and their lack of empathy, it makes it a dangerous combination because they can manipulate you. They know what excites you, what you like, and they will try to exploit that, and then that gives them power. They don't like situations where it's equal, like in a therapy group or a 12-step meeting or any kind of situation where you're an equal. They like to be in hierarchical situations, in the military, in corporations, the police force, or in the public eye.
At the top.
At the
not
top.
At the bottom.
That's right. They want to be at the top. They want to make the decisions, and they don't want to answer to anybody.
I mean, I want to do that too, but I don't think I'm a narcissist. But, I mean, can that be a healthy impulse?
Well, sure. Some people want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be leaders, but they're sensitive to the needs of other people too. They don't exploit them, and they don't steal their ideas, hopefully.
Okay, maybe I'm the good Oprah kind then. Okay.
Now I forgot what your question was.
Oh, well, why are we so attracted?
Attracted, yes. Okay. So there's this first that they do this impression management. They want to make a good impression, okay? So they go to, and they're very good at it with their manipulation. And there's some narcissists that'll just talk about themselves, but there's other narcissists that will try to bring you out, and they'll say, oh, you like soy milk. That's what I like too.
I see.
They'll try to...
Common ground. They'll charm you.
They'll charm you, yeah. Oh, you went there. That was my favorite trip. So that makes you feel good, right? You feel seen. Or on the other hand, you admire, and they attract codependents. Or people who are codependent maybe fall for that because they may have insecurity of their own because of some of the things I mentioned earlier, and they want to be in the limelight. Usually codependents don't want to be leaders. They want to be next to the leader. They want to be the person behind the scenes.
But in that aura, and enjoy the glow of it.
Exactly, the glow of it. They may be married to a narcissist who's the life of the party, or they're married to a celebrity, or someone very powerful. Raises their self-esteem, and it boosts their self-image. So that's one reason. And they idealize. They will look up to. They will fall for all the grandiosity, and they'll idealize the narcissist. Interestingly, the degree of idealization is usually commensurate with the degree of depression.
Oh.
So there's an interesting paradox. I call it the paradox of shame. And the common denominator between codependents and addicts and narcissists is shame. And so I've gained expertise in all three areas, and I can see how it's all an interrelated web. When someone gets together with a narcissist, they both agree that the narcissist comes first in the beginning. That might sound strange, but a codependent is very happy to go along to get along. They don't want to make waves. The narcissist wants to get ahead. So that's part of it. So the codependent might not have good self-esteem, but they project that, idealize that on someone else. And the flip side is the narcissist will look down on people, but inside they don't feel so great themselves. So there's this interesting paradox. Shame can be inflated or you can feel deflated. You know, typically a codependent wants to be rescued. They lack that agency to do it for themselves that a narcissist has. They can get things done. And so they look for that, and then they deny, the negative. They minimize or they rationalize the insults. They will sacrifice themselves again. They don't have good self-esteem about their own needs. And so they go along with it, and they deny the negativity. They don't want to know about it. They won't. Just like someone may be in a marriage and finds out their partner is cheating, they will rationalize it. They don't want to face it because, then I have to take an action. So, and it's also interesting. I have a blog on why we deny bad behavior, and they did research on that too. And when you are in the same group, or the same family, or it's your friend, or the same political party, you tend to give the other person more slack. If it's a stranger cheating or doing something, you criticize and you won't like that. You'll reject them. But if it's someone in your own ethnic group, your own family, you tend to rationalize it. So that's just human nature. It creates cohesiveness socially.
Well, so it sounds like part of this is to vicariously, the codependent or the admirer wants to vicariously experience power, confidence, that glow. So that's the part of what's happening. Yeah. I'm particularly interested in the political ramifications and why whole movements form around these tyrants. Allegedly is making me safe and going to protect me. So I think there's that theme underneath it.
Right, and protect you from others. So like Hitler, they would scapegoat other people, and then when economics were bad, people will look for a scapegoat. But a good leader will do this incrementally. So they don't take away all your rights at the beginning and start doing outrageous things in the beginning. They first win your trust. And with propaganda and a lot of impression management again, they promise a lot of things, and people go along with it, they buy into it, and then they're kind of trauma bonded, they're kind of wedded, and then they start to overlook the crimes, the exploitation, the self-embellishment, or that was the one thing I think that upset people when they found out Putin had all these mansions and taking money from the coffer. People give him a pass once the person has their allegiance.
On to codependency.
Well, a codependent, by the way, there's no unified definition. There's been many definitions over the years. I came up with my own for the book after doing research and thinking about what I had learned about myself, because that was my issue too, and with clients and research, and that it's someone whose thinking and behavior revolves around something other than themselves. So it could be a drug, it could be a person, it could be a process like a sex addict or addictive shopping or debting or gambling. So they're not in touch with their innate self. So that's part of the problem with idealizing somebody else, is you're not really connected to yourself. So you don't realize maybe when someone is very subtly putting you down or exploiting you, you might not even recognize it. A lot of codependents aren't in touch with their anger even because of their childhood upbringing. Maybe they were punished for that, or they had a domineering or aggressive parent, they don't take care of themselves. They don't have good boundaries. That's a sign of codependency too. Dysfunctional communication, dysfunctional boundary. I mentioned low self-esteem, shame, control is a big issue. So they like to tell other people what to do, sometimes in the guise of helping them. Sometimes they'll just be very direct, or other times it's kind of passive manipulation. So they're trying to be helpful. They've lost touch with their innate self, and part of recovery is then getting in touch with your feelings, identifying your needs, especially emotional needs, because codependents often can come from a home where they had all their material needs met, but their emotional needs were ignored. They were told you were too sensitive, or you shouldn't feel that way. Why are you caring about that? So those are all ways of putting someone down, or they're rewarded for performance. It's conditional love. Everybody needs to feel that both parents want a relationship with them and love them for who they are as an individual. So it's not enough that they praise you because you get good grades, or you're a good athlete or musician, but they want to get to know you and validate your interests, not that you are now accommodating what they want because they think you should become a doctor, a lawyer, or something like that. That they will support you in what you want to do. Codependents often learn to then accommodate the parent rather than the other way around, and it's generational. If you have a parent that is, let's say, a child of an alcoholic or an abusive parent, or a home where there was some kind of trauma or mental illness or just an illness that took over the family, then the parenting gets compromised and the child doesn't get recognized for who they are. It just gets passed on generationally. Even when you don't want to do this to your children, you do it unconsciously. So I always say the best way to raise your children's self-esteem and not pass on codependency is to work on yourself, because then you don't need your children to fulfill you. A lot of parents, and what I'm saying, they want to live through vicariously, like you said, through their children. Their children have to be successful so it reflects well on them. Or they brag about their children and then at home they criticize them.
Complicated. Well, just to be vulnerable, I think if I trend in any direction, it's this direction, codependency. And I think I've been in somewhat of that kind of relationship before. But doing my own work on it, I see it as a continuum. So at one end, the extreme end, you're bending over backwards for somebody else and letting them crap on you, or, just putting up with abusive behavior or maybe covertly sabotaging them, or, boundaryless, and you're getting taken advantage of. But moving a little closer to the middle, kind of extending yourself for them a lot, and they're not so much for you. I mean, it's not in some pernicious, awful way, but you're going out of your way to do things for them, and you're overlooking their faults, and they're not necessarily doing it back. So that's a little closer to the middle, but not so much in a catastrophic situation. But then on the other side of the divide, and hopefully you'll help define how to get that divide, is people doing things for each other in relationship, like there's respect and good boundaries, but you're also, going out of your way to overlook their faults and doing things for them, and it's mutual, like this beautiful giving that makes a relationship very healthy and rich. So, some of the same qualities you might see in a codependent person is going to show up in a healthy relationship, but just with a little different frame to it.
Right, I call that interdependency.
I like it.
So you get to the point where in every relationship, you have to accept the person who they are. So it's interesting. Codependent trajectory, stages of relationship, they meet someone, they idealize them, it's romantic, they fall in love, they make commitments, and then they get to know the person. And then they try to change the person back into their ideal, that they, this wonderful person that was going to rescue them from their unhappiness. And they want to make that other person responsible for their happiness. So a healthy relationship, you go slower, you get to know the person, you start to see things you don't like. That's the ideal stage. Then you go through the ordeal, where you decide, am I going to stay with this person? Are their faults so bad? Are they violating my bottom line, things that I couldn't tolerate? Or is there enough good that I can stay in this? And you learn to accept that. So that's important for the survival of a relationship, that you accept each other. And that could take time. And then there's the real deal at the end, where you fall deeper in love with each other for who the person is, not your projection, your ideal, and constant disappointment. Codependents are disappointed that the person that they now, especially if it turns out to be a narcissist, is not who they thought they were in the beginning. And interestingly, when I work with people that are married to narcissists and they say, oh, he was not like this, or she was not like this in the beginning, that's what they say when they first come to therapy. But over time, with more awareness, they say, yes, there were signs where the person was controlling, or ignored my needs, or was using me for something or other. They start to realize there were signs that they overlooked. And a lot of times, the person will tell you up front, well, yeah, I cheated in my other relationship, I have this prison record, or they'll tell you things. And you overlook it because you're so captivated.
That's not going to happen in this story.
Right, I will change, it won't happen to me. And they badmouth their exes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and you bring up another point. I'd like to do research on this, but I'm not an expert on research. But I think there's a continuum, like you said, of inflated false pride that the narcissist has, and the devalued self, the low self-esteem that a codependent has. And in healing, you will come to the middle where you have realistic self-esteem. Your self-esteem is not inflated. You could admit that you're not good at certain things. You have flaws that you accept in yourself. So your self-esteem is realistic. It's not too low and it's not too high. Pride is not false pride, and it's not a lack of pride.
You know, in a mature relationship, we do our best to come at them in a good mood, do little anticipate their needs. This is just a mature, nice relationship. It doesn't have to be codependent.
Absolutely. People feel loved when someone goes out of their way to meet their needs. People have different love languages.
Yeah, we got a lot of planes today.
Okay. So one person will want to hear the words. Another person wants to see deeds. Someone else feels loved by touch and affection. It's different meanings to different people. It's interesting to find out with your partner, what is their love language? How do they show love, and what makes them feel loved? And it's often different than your own. And you may be doing something that you think is going to make your partner happy and love you, but it's not meaningful to them. It's not what they want. It's a good thing to talk about with your partner and even with your friends. But you mentioned earlier about pleasing and wanting to please your partner, and the difference between that and codependency. Well, when you're in the throes of codependency, before you've had any recovery, you don't have a choice. You can't really say no. Even if you have to go out of your way, if someone asks you for something, a codependent has difficulty and feels guilt and anxiety if they have to say no. They postpone things or make excuses, but it's hard for them to just say no. And they get themselves into a lot of trouble, and they neglect themselves because they're so externally focused on someone else. It's like they want to make someone else happy so they'll feel happy. It's a haywire system because they're not in touch with their innate self. They don't think, how do I feel? What do I need, and how to meet their needs. And instead, They try to meet someone else's needs, so that person will make them happy. It's really screwy and backwards.
Yeah, and put up with a lot of unacceptable behavior and violation because they want to be liked, or they want to complain, or they don't want to rock the boat.
They try harder.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah.
So let's now discuss some terms you brought up earlier, shame and guilt. And maybe you could explain the difference there. A lot to be said on this topic.
Right. And I did a lot of research for that book, and it was very interesting to me to find out that guilt is actually good in some cases because it promotes corrective behavior. It promotes relationships where you'll make amends. You're thinking about your impact on somebody else. You maybe want to reform your behavior and can be healthy. If it's not, codependents have a lot of irrational guilt. They feel guilty for someone else's behavior. They feel guilty that their partner is drinking or that their partner is angry at them right away. They absorb, all this guilt and blame. That's not what I'm talking about. But shame, on the other hand, has no redeemable effects other than maybe to keep you from doing unseemly things in public. It promotes social norms. Maybe you wouldn't talk on your cell phone in church or at a funeral, things like that, or defecate in public. Shame is you feel like you're irredeemable, that somehow you're bad, and it creates hopelessness because you think that you're just a lost cause, that you're a bad person. You think of someone being alienated from the tribe. They used to send like a murderer out into the wilderness, shunning them. And actually the person would die. That's how you feel. You shun yourself. And it's the worst feeling because you can't even think about your good qualities. You feel alienated not just from other people, but any goodness in yourself. Guilt, though, is that, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that. And you can apologize, you can rectify it, you can decide, I'm going to reform and I'm not going to do that thing anymore. But they can cross over. If you have underlying shame, usually comes from childhood, from either neglect or what I was describing before, where a parent just does not see you, doesn't validate you for who you are, but for only what you do, so you don't really feel seen. You don't feel your needs or feelings validated. So that tends to produce shame. It's kind of an emotional abandonment. It's considered a trauma. And so you never feel like you're quite enough. And that can lead to fear and fear and guilt and depression. And, worst case, underneath that is emptiness. I have a whole chapter on emptiness in my book on shame because that's what's underneath it, this worthlessness and emptiness. But you can turn it around. We're usually our own worst critic. Start writing down all your negative self-talk. That was my first ebook, 10 Steps of Self-Esteem, and I also have a webinar on how to build your self-esteem. Start writing down all your negative self-talk. And what's unconscious will control you. Most people don't realize how much negativity they put on themselves, and they wonder why they're depressed or have no motivation. Writing it down every day, and that includes, I should have done that, I shouldn't have done that, I should do this. So the shoulds, the tyranny of the shoulds, that falls into the same category as negative self-talk. And you have to pull the weeds, and then you plant the good seeds, and you start giving yourself encouragement. And your unconscious doesn't distinguish between positive self-talk from you or praise and encouragement from someone else. It's very literal. So you can encourage yourself, you can congratulate yourself, compliment yourself, and it'll have the same effect as if someone else does. And start doing that.
That sounds very healthy. What a nice thing to do for yourself. But you're saying the first way to interrupt this looping cycle is just to become aware of it, and through writing it down, just keep track of it, and you'll see how much you're doing. So that's, I think, a really good suggestion. One comment I want to make about this whole emotion, shame is actually an emanation of conscience. We feel bad when we don't do right. So as I say, so to me, that emotion is actually a positive thing. It's our guide, it's our rudder to like, what dignifies me? What makes me a person of character? And I will feel ashamed if, I'm a broker and I steal that old lady's retirement fund. And in fact, a lot of people involved in criminality, they're more ashamed of getting caught than they are of whatever bad thing they did. To me, shame gives us conscience. And it's somehow, when we're overloaded with it, it destroys the beneficial aspect. But when it's in its right proportion, it really will tell us right from wrong. It's our moral guide.
Shame and guilt are moral emotions. That's what researchers call them.
Okay, so we're not
absolutely
so much
right.
in disagreement.
Yeah, and when you talk about a criminal or someone with no remorse, that is a sign of more of sociopathy and psychopathy. If you have a narcissist that has no remorse, that's more on the malignant side. I was talking about the traits of narcissists, and they're on a continuum too, just like codependency. So someone might just have the minimum 5 traits, and they could be very mild, or someone could have all 9, and they'd be extreme. And by the way, the more aggressive a person is, the worse the narcissism is, the more severe. So lack of remorse is not even on the list, but when someone is lying and unremorseful, they're less likely to change. But they did research, I have a blog on the dark triad, and what they found is if you confront a narcissist directly with a question, they will more often tell you the truth. But if they can get out of it or circumvent it, they will. But someone who's sociopathic, psychopathic, they don't have compunctions about lying, so there's a difference there.
I heard that narcissists don't mind being called selfish or being called a narcissist. They do mind having their capability questioned. They don't like being called stupid. I don't know if that's true, but
well, if they want to be the best of everything, okay, perfect with everything. So they're especially sensitive to any sign of weakness because they idealize power. So if you tell a codependent, oh, you're so selfish, that would be mortifying to them.
Got it.
Because they value relationships and connection. And narcissist values power. So if you tell them, oh, you're so emotional or weak or lonely, any kind of sad, embarrassed, those kind of feelings that are more vulnerable, that's when they feel more humiliated. So they don't really want to talk about feelings, and it's a mistake for their partners to start telling them how hurt they are and their feelings. It's more helpful, and I developed something called strategic transactional communication, and that's what works with them, to tell them the impact of their behavior, and an impact in a way that is meaningful to them. So if they want to have sex with you, and you say, when you put me down, rather than go into how it hurts you, you say, I really don't feel like having sex with you. It's just my loving feelings go away. That's important to them because they are transactionally focused. What can they get for the lowest price? Wow. How little do they have to put out to get what they want? And so you have to up the ante. Instead of partners usually are giving them whatever they want. And the narcissist will ask for more and more, and they just keep, giving more. My whole book is about how to change the power dynamics, how to take back your power and level the playing field and let them know that this is a two-way street. It has to work for both of us.
Darlene Lancer, it has been a joy having you here today. I hope we can do this again. I think this is a series. Where can people reach you?
Oh, I'm all over the internet and social media, and my website is either my name, darlenelancer.com, whatiscodependency.com. My books are Amazon and other in stores, or you can get PDFs on my website. I also have some freebies on there and 14 tips for letting go to help people let go if they're in a painful relationship.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. It's been fun.